I mean, and honestly too, this is probably about past my bedtime because I'm like 90 years old. So that's something too. But yeah, so my name's Corey. I'm a website designer and developer. I primarily, well, I'll say this first is like, thanks for all coming. Cause like, I think, and I'm hoping you all get value out of this, regardless of like, if you even are a designer developer. This is kind of geared towards really anybody who just works with customers, which is everybody here. And so I'm going to make it a little bit more interactive. There'll be a few things I want you to just kind of work on me with. But it'll be fun. It'll be good. But yeah, I primarily do website design and development, some marketing stuff on the side, and that's like video production and some content creation as well. And then my favorite pie is actually pot pie in terms of, I remember as a kid that I used to love like Marie Callender's like frozen pot pies. And it was always like the challenging decision was always like, do I microwave it because I'm hungry now? Or do I bake it and it actually tastes like 10 times better? That was always my challenge with frozen pot pies. Because when you microwave it, like half of it's still frozen and half of it's cooked or 1,000 degrees and it melts your face off. So that was a constant challenge for me. And then so am I able to share my screen, I assume? Let me see. I should be able to. Yeah.
Yep.
You guys see that?
Yep.
Cool. So great. So this is going to be kind of, if you have a website or you worked on a website or you finish a website or you kind of at that stage of like, okay, cool. I have something that people can find and connect with. What's actually getting people there? And like, this is like a really, really important topic that I think most people don't consider when they're actually, they have a business or they have a company that they work for, or they're designing for a certain business. Is like, what do we do then? Like, what's the next step? Because I think most of us here are probably pretty skilled at doing that first step of getting the job done, but then what do you do next? And so I want to introduce you to my buddy, Dan. And so this is kind of the start of knowing your audience and knowing your avatar, because this really is like the foundational. And the reason this is step number one is this is like the foundational piece of everything that happens after you create a website. Is you want to know exactly who you're talking to. And when I mean exactly, I mean like, how old are they? Are they married? Are they single? Do they have kids? Do they have a job? What do they do for work? What are their passions? What are their hobbies? What keeps them up at night? And so if I can actually drop this in the chat, I want to send this to you guys. You guys see that? Cool. So those are kind of the main questions that I start with whenever I'm trying to figure that out. You guys could rather copy and paste that. You could even jot down some ideas right now if you want to, because like every step after this is going to stem from this very first step. And the reason that I have this photo here with Dan is because like he was actually one of my first customers, one of my first clients. It's one of the first people that I worked with. And I loved it. And it was a ton of fun and it was super awesome. And I think that's really important, whatever work you're doing, whether you're at a job or have your own business or work for a company or whatever it is that there's a certain person that you find that you really are drawn to and really attracted to. And that's your avatar. Like, who did you just really connect with and have a great time with? And those are the people that you, if you could, you would work with them all day long. And so when you can actually sit down and figure out who they are, what they value, what their perfect day looks like, what kind of content is actually valuable to that person, it makes everything else easier in your business or in your company, or when you're trying to build a website or create content or whatever it is like, you're looking for that ideal person, that ideal client. And just to know, this is Dan. I mean, he's a functional medicine practitioner. He's about 32, single, no kids. He loves to travel. He's very into health and fitness. He occasionally likes to get out on the weekends and drink with his friends. In terms of like what kind of content he consumes, it's normally like YouTube videos, just educational things about health and fitness. And like, so I know like everything about this person and I gear things towards him. So like, when I'm creating a website, I also take into consideration like certain sections of that website. Am I talking to this person? Because copy matters a lot when you're creating that website as well. Of like, I think we often get tripped up on like trying to be professional and making it look perfect, like this stock website. But realistically, what kind of language does Dan relate with, or your avatar relate with? Like, how do they talk? How do they communicate? And like that's the language that you want to speak in when you're trying to create content or copy or videos or photos on your website, is like speak directly to your avatar, to your person. Step number 2. Oop, there we go. Choose your platform. So again, this is after you already have your website and it's like, okay, now I want to start driving traffic. I know who I want to talk to. How do I talk to them? Right. And there's really 3 options. There's written, there's video, and there's audio. That's really pretty much your only options. Right. And so they all kind of have their pros and cons. And really, I always tell people is like, the best one is generally the one you're most comfortable doing, or or it's easiest for you to do. Because if you're not happy doing it, you're not comfortable doing it, you're not going to continue to do it, and it's just not going to be successful. But in terms of pros and cons of each is, so writing is obviously sort of like blog posts, right? Or writing content, or just basic text on like LinkedIn or whatever your platform might be. But this is lowest barrier to entry. But I will say it's generally the easiest, in the sense that like most people can just do it, right? You can just pull up a text document and you can write, but you also have a lot of competition, right? So that makes it a little bit challenging. Anybody who says blogging is dead is completely wrong, because there are still a lot of people that read blog posts. And so they are still very, very valuable. So low barrier to entry, anybody can do it. Some people prefer it, some people don't. It's really kind of what you're into. The second one would be audio. The pros of audio is that having your voice, like even just hearing my voice in your ear right now, automatically makes somebody more relatable. So when you think about the difference between writing something versus listening to something, when you're looking at written text, there's no relationship there. So you're not really connecting anybody, versus when you listen to something and you hear their voice, you automatically feel a little bit more connected to them. The barrier to entry is a little bit higher than written, in the sense that it does take a little bit of work, and that's having good equipment or being able to edit it, and having the software to edit it makes it a little bit more challenging. But being a little bit more challenging does make it a little bit more valuable. And then the last option is video, which definitely has the highest barrier to entry, in terms of it takes a lot of work. If anyone's ever edited video or done any sort of video editing, it takes a ton of work. It takes some form of skill, not that you can't learn it, but the barrier to entry is definitely the highest. But I will say the relatability is definitely the highest, of when you can see people and you can hear people, you connect with them, you can relate to them, and then you're more likely to go to their website and go check out their stuff. All of them have their pros and cons, but realistically, at the end of the day, it's whichever one you're most comfortable with. Step number 3 would be your production plan. And so again, this always goes back to step number 1 of who's your avatar, right? And so there's many different ways you can do this, but I kind of have a few suggestions or tips for you guys for when you're trying to create a basic content plan. So you have your avatar. Step number 1. Step number 2, you choose your platform. So that's written, video, or audio. And so let's say, for just example, let's say you wanted to do podcast or something. You want to do some form of audio. That seems like a middle of the road type thing, right? So then the first thing you'd want to do is like, how often are you scheduling your release, your content? And so whenever I'm going to give you a number of questions here, and you can, if you ping me later, I can give you these, but like, I'm going to give you a number of questions. And the first thing you want to think about when you're answering this question is, who's your avatar and what would they want? Right? So really take kind of all your selfishness out of it and just think about who's your avatar, who you talking to, what's going to help them out the most, what's going to get them to come to your website and reach out to you, make a connection with you. And that's how you answer these questions. So the number 1 question would be, how often are you basically posting? Is it once a week? Is it every other week? Is it once a day? Is it once a month? And the question you have to ask yourself is, well, how often does my avatar, or my Dan, or my Matt, or whatever the person that you gave their name, how often do they listen to content? Is it every day on their way to work? Is it once a week when they go on a walk? Is it when they're just sitting around cooking dishes? Like, when are they listening to it? How often are they listening to it? The next one would be the length of your content. And so this would be, is it 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, is it an hour? Do they have an hour? How long is their drive? Or what are the hobbies that they're doing that they could listen to this for an hour, right? If you're doing a podcast, ask yourself, is like, well, they love to go hiking. So that's probably an hour there where they're probably hiking. I could probably create content that's an hour long. The next one would be which days of the week, which comes down to, again, your avatar. Next one would be, I got one more here. Sorry, hold on. And what's the average length it'll take to create the content? And so generally it's like double for most things of whatever you're creating. So like if you're thinking an hour podcast show, at least give yourself 2 hours to block out where you're actually going to be working on that content. All right. Step number 4, create the content. So there's a 6-step formula that I use. And again, I can send all these to you. But number 1 is start with the end in mind and then reverse engineer that, right? And so basically, what is the purpose of the content? And then reverse engineer from there. Number 2 is use stories, guides, or case studies. Number 3 is do a complete brain dump on all of your ideas. Number 4 is to organize the ideas in a hierarchy. Number 5 is to create the hook. And number 6 is to create the title. So notice there that the hook and the title are at the end, right? So the very first step of this whole process, I'll drop it in the chat as well. The very first step of this whole process is basically understanding that what is the purpose of the content? And then you work backwards from there in terms of like, then you tell a story, you start giving some sort of brain dump ideas that come from that. You have the hook and then you have the title, and I'll drop this in the chat here. There we go. All right. Number 5. I love this meme here. It makes me laugh every time. So launch. So this one comes with a lot of resistance. And so just kind of working through these steps is basically, we have our avatar, we have our platform, we have our plan, and then we're basically creating content. And now we want to distribute it, right? Whether it's a blog post on your website or a YouTube video or a podcast show or whatever it is, this is the step where it's actually really, really important, because as much as we'd like to think build it and they will come, it definitely is not the case. And so we have to have some way to basically promote what we're doing and what we're creating. And so regardless of like what your content or your copy or your audio content is like, you have to promote it in some way, shape, or form. And this comes with a lot of trial and error. I've tried a number of things myself in terms of different launches of different shows and videos and audio that I've created myself, and it hasn't always gone that great. And so there's a bit of trial and error with this one, but I'll tell you, this is one lesson that I can save you, or one lesson I made myself or learned from myself that hopefully you guys can avoid, is that hope marketing never works. And so don't make that mistake. So you definitely want to tell people, tell your friends, put yourself out there. The challenge with this step for most people, I think, is just the resistance that comes with this. If you guys are familiar with Steven Pressfield at all, basically he just talks about like, whenever you're creating or putting your work out in the world, you're basically to some degree slaying a dragon every single time, and that there's a lot of resistance that comes with that, a lot of fear of judgment and self-doubt, and will anybody care, and will I get enough likes, and will people follow me, and everything else that comes with that. And it's challenging, and I have definitely been there. And so anyone who's ever created content or really ever created anything in the world feels that resistance, and just so know that it's normal. But realistically, it's I was once told, be judged or be ignored. And so I think a lot about that when I'm creating content, and I try to take all my selfishness out of it when I'm creating this stuff. But for sure, put it out there in the world, because really it's be judged or be ignored at the end of the day. So next one is to build your funnel. And so basically what I'm getting at with this one is like, I don't want to get too into funnels in the sense of like, what is a funnel and what does that mean? And I think there's a lot of like negative thoughts around like sales funnels and what that means. But think about it like this, is like, how many people in here, if you're married, got married on your first date? Nobody. How many people bought the first house that they bought? Nobody. Right. And so what I mean by that is that people generally won't come to you and buy from you whatever you're selling, and we're all selling something, right away. They need multiple exposures. They need multiple experiences. Really, humans buy from humans that they know, like, and trust. And in order to know, like, and trust somebody, you need multiple forms of engagement with that person before you're willing to do that. And so that's essentially what a funnel is it's an opportunity to have multiple engagements with the human before you say, hey, I have this thing that could hopefully help you. And then maybe they will consider it. Like take this, for example. So like, say you're buying a house, right? Tell me, which person are you going to buy a house from? Are you going to buy a house from? So I come to you and I'm like, hey, I'm a real estate agent. I have this amazing house. I've showed you this house and you should buy it, even though we just met and this is my first house. I know nothing about you. I don't know what you like or don't like. Are you going to buy the house? Probably not. Right. Versus another sales agent or a real estate agent that comes to you and they're like, hey, like, what are you looking for? What do you need? Like, what do you need a garage? No, you don't like that. Oh, you have 3 kids. Okay. So you need more bedrooms. You need more space too, to play with these kids. Like, which one of those people are you going to buy from? Right. That's essentially all a funnel is a funnel is a way. It's a journey for your avatar, your ideal person, basically to have multiple engagements with you and get to know you as a person, because they're going to buy from people that they know. And then the last step, which is arguably just as important as the first step, is being consistent. And so I often, I use what's called the rule of 100. And so basically what that means is that if I'm not willing to commit myself to doing it 100 times, I probably won't do it. Because so on average, so I follow this content marketing show or whatever it is, and basically they've broken down the math on it. And on average, to start seeing returns on pretty much anything you create, it takes about 12 to 24 months. And I was actually literally just having a conversation with my mentor earlier today. We went on a walk and he's been helping me build my business. And he was talking about how all of a sudden he's getting a whole bunch of traffic from this one blog post. And I was like, well, how long have you been blogging? And he's like, about 13 months. I was like, oh, okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense, right? Like, he put this blog out from 13 months ago that's now finally pulling in, I think he said like 500 hits a day or something like that. And it's, so just keep that in mind. And like, so that's the importance of consistency with all this stuff, is like the middle stuff's important. Number one, for sure, know your avatar, and the middle stuff's important. But realistically is like, know your avatar, stay consistent, and know that it's going to take a lot of time. So like anyone who's ever launched a website, which I'm sure is most everybody here, knows that like you launch it and you're like, sweet, here we go, a whole bunch of people, and it doesn't happen. And it rarely does it ever happen. The only hack to that, honestly, which I wouldn't even call it a hack, is paid advertising. But the problem with paid advertising is that I actually was just talking to a guy the other day, and he was doing, I don't remember how many thousands of dollars he spent on paid advertising. And he goes, I haven't got a single sale from it. And I was like, oh, okay. And so it comes back to that idea of know, like, and trust, is that an advertisement, there's not really a connection there, versus when you're actually creating content for your ideal client, whoever they are, there is some form of connection, whether it's written, audio, or video. There's actually a real connection there because they know you're a real human. And so just keep that in mind. Any questions?
I thought that was, did you say you said thousands of dollars?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. For a second, I thought you said hundreds of thousands of dollars. I was like,
I don't remember how many $1,000 he put into it, but he hasn't seen a single sale from it.
I think that the advertising too I had a SEO advertising guy tell me, he's like, that's like it's the ads are like it's like the high fructose corn seed. It's like it's like the Coke that you drink to like give you instant energy, right? But it's not long-term sustained energy. Whereas, so they can kind of both play a role, but if you have the content and you're like your mentor who's been doing it for 13 months, and then you start advertising, now they're going to be able to find your stuff and create the relationship.
Yep.
But you can't just have the empty calories and expect the relationship to work.
1,000% agree. Yeah, that's 1,000% right. Like, advertisements can work, but you're exactly right in the sense of like, there needs to be a backbone for that to work. You can't just like pop up a website and post some advertisement and expect any return from it. I mean, as the saying goes, it's cliche, but like content is king and distribution is queen. And so like having really good, high valuable content is the root of everything. And it's going to take organically a decent amount of time, on average 12 to 24 months, before you see some sort of return from that. And like if you pump some advertising into it, it could work only if the content is good though. Like if the content is like not good, then it's actually going to do the reverse for you. It kind of just fast tracks good or bad things, frankly.
So I've got a question. You're building sites for clients and they come to you and they say, hey, build me a website. And then do you, and maybe it's in your business model, I don't know, but do you say, okay, I'll do this site for you, but just know that you're going to want a rule of 100. You're going to want to do 100 of these blog posts, or do you do that for them? Or how does that whole conversation go? Because I've been in this situation where people will say, well, I want to start a blog. And it's like, well, do you want to start a blog? Like, do you actually want to write? You know, and the thing I always say is go write down 20 blog ideas and write 5 of them. And once you've written 5, come back to me. And generally no one ever writes the 5, right? And these are all people like family members who are like, will you create a blog for me? And I'm like, okay, go write 5 blogs. But so I'm curious how that works with your clients. Are you having them do it? Do they do it? Does that turn anyone away from wanting to do websites?
Yeah, do you have to cut people down if they say, hey, I want this website? And you can say like, yeah, I can do that, but what's it for? You know, like, I'm not gonna put my time and effort into something that you're not putting into the world efficiently. I mean, this is me building this in my imagination a little bit, but
yeah, I've had that. It's funny you say that. I've had that exact same conversation. Actually, I had a guy who he wanted to start creating videos, and I was like, great, like create 10 videos and then come back to me. And same thing, like he never came around and turned back. And so like I think that's a really good vetting strategy, honestly, is like having people see, because it's one thing to like say it, it's another thing to do it. I think people very quickly realize like how much work actually goes into something like that. I at this point don't have the team to create that kind of content for my clients. Eventually I would like to get there, but I just don't have a big enough team to do it because people don't understand how much work actually goes into that. And I will say too, is like as somebody who does like podcasts, like they call it pod fade. So if you actually go to like look at podcasts, like there's literally like millions of them on there, but there's actually only like maybe 10% of them that are actually active, because what they found is that anything more than 10 episodes, people just fall off and they just stop, and because they realize how much work actually goes into it, and they call it pod fade. So like, there's actually really not that even many podcasts out there because most of them have fallen off.
I talked to a guy, this was a couple of years ago. His name, he has a company called Sales Reach. And he said something that stuck with me. He does a lot of like videos that he puts on LinkedIn. And what he said, I wanted to just see if I could do something every week for 6 months. So I didn't care about viewers. I didn't care. I just said, can I do this every week for 6 months? Let me see if I can do that. And it was a test for myself to see if, and that's what he focused on. He wasn't focused on the numbers. He wasn't focused, and he might not even been focused on creating great content. He like, for him, it was more just like, can I do this consistently? And he's ended up sticking with it. And, you know, he's kind of, for people who know him on LinkedIn, he's like the guy, you know, he's like the link. Oh yeah, he's the guy that does all the videos. But
yep.
When I started doing this no code collab, I took that same mentality of like, if I get caught up in all of the numbers and the analytics and like who's subscribed and who has, how many views am I getting and all this stuff, I was like, I need to control what I can control. Can I do this every week until the end of the year? And I started doing it. And your point about be judged or be ignored. I mean, you start out and you're like, who's going to want to listen to this? Like, these suck. This is terrible. And you just get a little better every time.
If you're familiar with Seth Godin, he's like a marketing guru. Is like he talks about the dip, right? Is like any adventure you dive into, whether it's blog posting or podcasting or YouTube videos or going to the gym or whatever the hell it is, like any sort of new adventure, he calls it the dip of like it's exciting at first, and then you hit the dip of where it gets hard. And then it's like if you really can ride out that dip to that next like rise of where things actually get fun and you get consistent again and you start seeing results, that's where all the magic happens. But most people fall off in the dip. Like you get amped up, it's the new year, I have this new project, or I have this new website, or I have this whatever the hell it is. And then like you fall off because then it gets hard, because everything gets hard no matter what it is. And like, and that's the interesting thing too about like staying consistent with some of this stuff is like it's hard being consistent, but you know what else is hard is like not being consistent and feeling crappy about yourself. I don't know if I can swear on this, but like is like both of those are hard. It's like which hard do you want to choose? Like,
Well, I mean, can I ask, and this is a little bit of an open question, and I have to say, I wish Dustin was here. To anyone who doesn't know, Dustin is a regular attendee and my beloved colleague who is like the most computer savvy person I have ever met. But I had a conversation with him one time about how Google bots crawl websites and how your website ranks higher if the content is constantly changing and updating, and if you have new content on a regular basis. Does anyone by any chance have any insights into that? Because I think it's kind of an interesting tie for like website performance and how good new content actually contributes to that. I personally can't be overly knowledgeable on the subject.
There's one thing I can comment on regarding that. One hack that people tend to use, and you've probably all seen this at some point, is when you're looking for something, and maybe it's in like the marketing niche or something, and you see these lists like top something trends of so and so here. And a lot of times what's happening is a lot of people are just going in and they have this post and it's got like, you know, tons of views every month or year or whatever, and they just keep changing the year. So as long as something's relevant, and you now that I've told you this, you're going to start looking for it, because you'll see, you know, like, I don't know, top 5, it's a Webflow meetup, but WordPress plugins to use in 2021, right? And there are a bunch of WordPress plugins which you probably know, and you know you've used it before, but they've changed the year. And this is kind of a hack that I've seen people use. But regarding an actual point regarding as far as crawling goes, it's periodically checking for new content. So it's kind of adding and building on that sitemap that you know you have, like in Webflow, for example. If you go in, I don't know which exact section in the settings, you have that sitemap. So it's constantly building and adding to that sitemap as you publish content, and then Google's also you know, pinging that sitemap and saying, hey, do you have new content? Hey, do you have new content? And then behind the scenes, they have the algorithms which kind of, you know, figure out, okay, is there like a good user experience? Are there relevant keywords, etc.? But that timing does, or rather just having new content, you know, whether it's, you know, weekly, daily, whatever your frequency, that does help eventually.
Did you say they're just updating the date, or are they actually duplicating the post so that they have a new page on their sitemap?
So it's hard for me to say for sure, but I've seen cases where like the URL for that post is just the same. Like there's no year mentioned in that URL. So it's not like, you know, top 5 WordPress plugins -2021. So it looks pretty obvious that, you know, they've just changed the year. Maybe they've added some content. I don't know. I mean, I can't say, I haven't been to that particular post every year to check. So, but you'll see this, and then you'll see where they have, like, say, for example, 2021, and you do the Google search, you'll see that date small kind of next to the link in the description and all that, and it'll say, okay, you know, December 2020 or something. Like maybe they updated it for like the forthcoming year, something like that.
And sometimes I think, how did someone just write this post?
That's
3
why.
weeks before I searched for this, like top chat bots for Webflow, and then it's like, why was someone wrote this 3 weeks ago? What? So I'm
Well-
always like, and I'm probably getting duped. I'm like, oh, this is the one I should probably know better.
But I'm sure a lot of these people that use these, and I see these in like the top, on the first page of Google. So I'm assuming they already have good content and they're posting a lot, but it's just something that they've done that kind of like just visualizes, whatever is recent is going to make it up there.
Can I ask how many people just like raise their hands, like are creating content or have created content? Like,
Not lately.
no. Okay.
How many
I-
like doing it?
Just me.
That's fair. That's good.
Have
So I
you-
got it.
I was gonna ask,
Sorry, Corey, if you.
I was just gonna say, like, have you guys found results or found things that have been successful for you guys personally, or how have you guys been doing it? Has there been some wins for you guys?
No, but I recognize the dip.
Yeah,
I don't
definitely the
think it-
dip. I kind of go up and down, a little roller coaster, trying to like, oh, I've got 3 case studies I should add, and I should write some blog posts for that, and then post all that to social media. It needs to be on Facebook. It needs to be on Instagram.
Hmm.
I don't do TikTok, but I know some people rave about TikTok, but I saw something the other day that fewer than 90, something like 97% of TikTok streams have more than 25 followers. Like only 3% of the like 97% of the traffic is going to like 3% of the TikTok accounts.
Well,
But-
and it's also
Oh, go ahead.
important to understand where your audience is, right? Like a lot of the TikTok audience tends to skew younger. If that's not your audience, then don't waste your time, trying to reach people on that, on that platform. That's
Know your
that's-
avatar.
Very
That's
true.
an interesting thing.
I was just going to say that Jonah said in the chat, I learned what not to do. I can relate to that a lot because I joined Instagram as a geriatric just last year. So I think I had about 6 months of awkwardness before I was like, oh, okay, I probably shouldn't use hashtags. But I digress, Kyle.
You're not supposed to use hashtags in Instagram.
Not for your personal posts that don't have an objective, no. It's thirsty.
Did you say it's thirsty?
So
Did you-
I heard that come out of somebody's mouth that is thirsty to put hashtags on personal content, that you don't have an objective that like supersedes just reaching out to your general audience. I was like, oh man,
Then you're like mucking up if people search.
I don't know.
I hate that.
Judgers. Got some judgers in your life. Jeez.
So you said in your presentation, you said, okay, obviously think where your avatar is, but then there's like this Venn diagram, right? Of like, where is your avatar and what do you like? And hopefully there's like this middle section that overlaps, right? That you like doing this and that's where your audience is. And now, so my question is, do you think, obviously if you're in that middle part of the Venn diagram, you're in the sweet spot. But if you're just outside, you're not, there is no, but you're close enough. Maybe it's not TikTok and you're shooting for people who are, looking for Medicaid, right? But if you're close enough, it's like, yeah, really most of your people listen to podcasts, but you decide, okay, well, I actually really like doing video. That's what I really like doing. Do you think that if you are consistent and you do it and you're consistent with it and you're making good content and it just happens to be on a platform that isn't the optimal platform, do you think that that's still a problem? Or do you think that will, if you're consistent, you do it long enough, that will be okay?
Really,
And I don't know if there's a right answer.
Yeah.
I'm more, it is the platform, I guess what I'm getting at is the platform so important, like, oh, you're doing that on Instagram. You got to be on Twitter. You got to be on Twitter. And it's like, do I need to be on Twitter or do you just think if I really like Instagram, Do you see what I'm getting at? Does the platform, is that so important, or is the consistency the important part?
Well, I think consistency is number one, but I think that I guess so. There's written audio and video, but where you distribute that that's where you're thinking about your avatar, right? So let's say, for example, like your population is, we'll say geriatrics for the sake of example, and like, but you really like doing audio, which generally caters itself to like podcasts, but it doesn't have to be podcasts, right? Like you could technically put that audio. I don't know why I picked geriatrics. I don't know where the hell geriatrics
You
hang
do
out.
an AM radio show.
Yeah, but seriously, you could do like, I don't know, what's their favorite radio station. So there's your audio. But I think it's just that's the progression, right? Is like whatever platform you're into, and then distribute that directly to wherever that perfect avatar is, whatever they are, if that makes sense.
So if you like to write, it doesn't matter. Like you like
Put
to
in the
write.
newspaper.
Now choose Medium,
Right.
choose your blog, choose a newspaper, so find the medium that you like, the medium that you like, and then and then pick your channel based on your audience.
Totally. That's exactly what I would do.
And if you pick the wrong medium, is that a death sentence, do you think?
No, but I think it's for sure will have an impact on how much traffic you might get from it, which is fine. No, I don't think it does, because like, I think realistically too, to go back to like the rule of 100 or even like the rule of 1,000 is that like, so let's take my business, for example. Technically speaking, I could have a very successful business and be super happy with 10 to 20 clients, assuming they're very, very good clients.
Yeah.
Right. I don't need to reach everybody. There's a very specific audience that I would love to connect with and build relationships with and help out. And so you really don't need, I mean, because if you market to everybody, you market to nobody, right? And so, and that's also too, something I forgot to mention when I was talking about some of this stuff too, is that like this approach to like understanding how to drive traffic to your website or your business or your company or whatever it is, it's not that you're saying no to everybody. It's not that you're like saying like, oh, I don't work with this person because you're not my avatar. That's not what that's saying at all. It's just that like, in order to cut through the noise and the clutter of how much we're constantly getting bombarded with forms, like think about it. We are consuming content all day long. And the only way to cut through that noise of stuff is you have to be very specific and you have to be very direct. It's like the spearhead approach versus the shotgun approach. And that only is related to like who you're trying to connect with though. That doesn't mean you say no to other people. If you have somebody that comes to your door and they're like, hey, you really connect and you jive and you have an awesome relationship, for sure, like build on that and help them and add to them. But like, this is just purely from like understanding of like how you're directing your marketing strategy, if that makes sense.
Speaking of Seth Godin, I was on a webinar with him last week. And
what?
I mean, I asked him, I like chatted a question to him that he answered, but I didn't, there were probably like 60 people on this webinar. So it wasn't just me.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And he talked about his minimum viable audience. And a lot of people talk about the minimum viable product. And he was like, no, find your minimum viable audience.
Yeah.
What is the smallest number of people that you can work with in order to have the business or to survive? And that's, any more than that, you start to, so it was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Was that the smallest number you said?
Minimum viable, what's the smallest number that your audience could be in order for you for your business to be what you want it to be effectively, or in order for your product to succeed? And I would say on your margins and your revenue, I mean, that could be one client, right? There's a lot of risk and exposure if you just have one client. But
and I would say for probably most everyone in this room, it's probably a lot smaller than you think. Yeah. Like no one in this room, I don't think, is selling, maybe you are on the side, but no one in here is really selling widgets, right? Like you're not selling like the latest like finger twiddle spinner. Like you don't need to sell 1 billion of these freaking things. Like you're probably, whatever your product or service is, it's probably a decent amount of money.
That number gets larger as you have more employees.
True.
Well, Adrian, how many employees do you have at your company?
Sorry, for some reason it wasn't unmuting. I had to. Yeah. I just 3.
Yeah. And so the demand of having like, what could I have? And I suppose when you go from your first, like you add your first employee, you're like, there's a lot of, it can feel like, oh man, now there's mouths I got to feed, right? Your number gets
Yeah,
bigger.
I've got like a little satellite of group that I collaborate with and send work to, or sometimes we kind of expand the team. But yeah, COVID definitely took like a big chunk out of my business last year, and it's just starting to come back to. And back to what Corey was speaking of, like you've got your avatar. I've actually got to rework my avatar. I've been working on it this summer because the niche we were shooting for when we niched down from what we were doing before has completely not brought in anything. Spent a bunch of time LinkedIn, a bunch of time in social media, writing blog posts to the specific audience, nothing. But then work started coming in from, like I said earlier, from digital marketing agencies, SaaS startups, and other things like that. So we're having to pivot our niche to like who we're actually serving instead of who we were trying to serve.
Now, do you update your website and the copy and all that?
I've got like a huge list in Notion right now of lead generation content, and I've got a whole bunch of stuff in Google Docs of blog posts. I've got like a dozen. I've been rewriting the pillar, so I've got 4 pillar content pieces for blog posts.
Yep.
And then I've got that are longer format, and then I've got shorter format pieces that tie into what those pillars are. So I've got some brand strategy, and I've got a key brand strategy post. Then I've got smaller chunks of brand strategy posts. Then I've got some case study posts, and I've got web design and development posts. And we also do, haven't done any web apps recently, but I've got another one for that.
What made you choose your initial avatar? Was it like, did you have a client and then just wanted to replicate that? Or did you just like think of, I mean, how did you figure that out to begin with?
I went to school to be an architect years ago and spent like a very short time as an architect. And all my friends that are architects have told me that it's a good thing that I pivoted my career because I really hate the architecture design business. But I was actually trying to do websites for architects and interior designers. That was one of the 3 avatars that we had. One was for software startups, so we can still keep that one going, but wasn't thinking about digital marketing agencies or SEO type work at all at that point 3 years ago. And but I know probably a dozen architects and like another dozen interior designers and real estate salespeople, and wasn't able to get work. 1 or 2 of them we had discovery sessions that didn't really go anywhere. They didn't have the budget that we were talking about, or they had just gone off on their own from working from some really large architectural development or architectural engineering firm, and they didn't have much of a portfolio, so they thought they needed more of a portfolio before they needed a website. And they were just like a little boutique 3-person operation and just didn't have the budget. So yeah, it's been kind of interesting from what I was trying to do a year ago that what I'm moving towards now, but I'm not sure if that helped explain anything. Sometimes
Yeah, I mean, the only reason I ask is because like I think that's more common the case, and people probably in here realize is that like, I mean, you only need to be right once, frankly. Is like, I mean, God knows I was wrong I'm 33, first 31 years of my life of like where I was going and what I was doing and the direction I was taking. And like, it definitely takes time and trial and error. And that's kind of the thing I wanted to touch on too in that talk, was just like, yeah, there's a ton of trial and error and ups and downs and valleys of suck that you go through before you figure out where your people are at, frankly.
So I posted something in the chat. It's a link to a picture, which you talk about the dip, right? And I maybe I've talked about it on here before, but I have I have what's called an accountability coach. It's through a company called Commit Action. And what you do is you have a weekly call with people and they do webinars. And that's actually how I was on the Seth Godin webinar. And basically you get someone, and every week you talk to them and you set out 3 goals for the week. And then you talk to them the next week and say, did you achieve those 3 goals? And then what are your next 3 goals for the week, blah, blah, blah. But they do a goal setting thing every year. And in that goal setting, he talks about, if you look, there's, if you look in the chat, there's the link to the image, and here it's called the emotional cycle of change. He just calls it like the emotional, I don't think he calls it that, but he talks about that same thing where like when you start a business or you start out on a path or you start out and you're going to like blog or whatever, you have this uninformed optimism where you're optimistic, but you don't even know whether or not you should be optimistic, right? It's this uninformed sense of optimism. And then it dips into like, no, actually now I'm informed and I'm starting to dip into that. I'm starting to go down in the dip. And then he calls it the valley of despair, or it's called the valley of despair, the dip. And then if you can come out of that, then then it's that you're informed, but now you're kind of optimistic because you're like, no, I've been there. I'm starting to see traction. And then the 5th stage is that fulfillment, but you're always going through that. So you'll go through that the first time, and then the next year you go through that again. Oh, and then you start a different project, and you're going through that same thing with a different project. Oh, and then you like get in a relationship in your personal life, and you're like going through that. It's like it's everywhere. And what he talks about generally happens, because there's this like behavioral psychologist that runs this Commit Action thing. He talks about that most people, and this goes into your pod fade or whatever, most people quit at the valley of despair. So they have this, oh, I've got this business idea. I'm gonna make widgets that, get my hair to grow, right? And so you start out, you get to the valley of despair, and generally what happens is people don't say that they quit. They're not like, I'm done, I can't, I'm quit. Generally what happens is there's like shiny object syndrome, and you end up going, oh, actually, that hair thing, yeah, well, I'm going to table that for right now because there's actually a better idea that you're excited about. And you go through that. Now you just shift from the valley of despair, and you are quitting without really saying, and now you're back into the uninformed optimism. And so it's the cycle that people go through, and getting through the dip is the.
I do. I mean, I have to say, just to bring this right back around to Webflow again, I'm sorry, I really can't help it. But this reminds me a lot of the learning curve for Webflow. And I bring this up only because, Jonah, I know that you mentioned to me, because we exchanged a few messages, that you're a beginner at this, or at the very least, you're kind of learning the ropes to a certain extent, rather than being like a certified Webflow expert. Adele, I don't know if you're in the same boat. We didn't hear from you. Tyler, you mentioned you were a bit new to this, but the Webflow 101 Crash Course Academy videos are so wonderfully good at laying everything out. It pumps you up with uninformed optimism like so hard, and then you get in there, and then you have to mess around like really, really aggressively to really get the hang of things, in the platform. And then I felt I vividly remember the curve on the way back up and kind of feeling a lot more comfortable with things. So just a quick word out there. I don't know if other people agree. I mean, everyone comes from different backgrounds. Maybe it's a walk in the park I know it's significantly easier for anyone with a coding background, but it's certainly what I reflect upon when I remember digging into Webflow for the first time. And I know everyone agrees about those academy courses because they're like just a fan favorite.
The thing that I'll just like to add on to that, as someone who came from a coding background, I feel that valley of despair oftentimes when I see the awesome things with people, like the things that FinSuite does. I look at that, I'm like, I don't know anything about Webflow. Like they're building these amazing sites, and like, look at all these interactions, and look at these sites. Like there's another company in Europe called Refocus. I don't know if anyone's heard of Refocus. Like they drew a diagram of like, yeah, we use Webflow for a front end, and then we use Vue.js, and then we're hooking that up with Airtable, and they're like, they're getting hardcore into tying code into their Webflow sites. And sometimes I look at that and I'm like, I don't know anything about Webflow. Like these guys are like really like, they're like pulling it apart and building it again, you know? And so it's, I guess what I'm saying is it's for everyone. Everyone's going through that sense of that valley of despair, the uninformed optimism, and it's real for everyone. I don't know, Penny, do you know you're a developer and you've been using the tool for years now. Do you still run into some of that?
Oh yeah, because I mean I'm slowly learning my way through it, and I'm okay as a developer, but I'm not amazing, and I'm not a real backend. Like I know HTML, CSS well enough to do what I do, but I struggle with it too. I mean, I struggle with the interactions because it's just that sort of imagination about, okay, take this thing and go do something with it. That doesn't come easily to me. So I then struggle with, well, if I wanted to do something here, what would I make move, and then figure out how to actually make it do something, right? And some of the things that I'm used to doing, because I would find some jQuery or whatever that would let me do things. It's like, okay, so that's something you do in an interaction now. Well, now what does that, then you have to figure out, well, what are the steps in that interaction? And so I get kind of overwhelmed and feel like I'm in the valley of despair lots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Feel free to chime in. I wrote a bunch of notes while Corey was talking of just like talking points that I was like thinking of while you're going through. And so I can pepper us with topics to chat about for, because I think it's so interesting. One thing that I've noticed recently, and I don't know if you guys have noticed it as well, or if you have any thoughts, but the written thing that I think is like coming back in a big way, is the newsletter. I feel like newsletters are like the daily newsletter or the weekly newsletter of like sign up for free and you'll get Monday and Wednesday, but if you want Friday, then you pay for that. Or, and how apps used to be like, I just want to get as many users. I want to get as many users on my app and then I'll figure out how to monetize. I feel like there's a lot of newsletters that are doing that of like, hey, if I can get as many emails on this newsletter, and then I'll figure out how to, I'll get sponsors or something and I'll monetize later. But I feel like newsletters are alive and well. And I subscribe to a few that I read every day and I love them. And it could be everything from sports to technology to politics to, you name it. I'm sure there are like recipe newsletters. Like that seems like another good way to like get exposure to your website and your brand.
So I'm glad you actually touched on that, because like that is, so I think one of the main reasons you're seeing that actually is because, so anybody in here who like creates content of any form, you ultimately want to get their email.
Yeah.
Is like really at the end of the day is like, that's literally the only source of like connection where like it's one-on-one, you own it, and Mark Zuckerberg can't, excuse my language, fuck you over. Is like, because that's what you're seeing on all these other platforms of like Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, any of them, they're owned by somebody else. And actually, because I work with so many health and fitness professionals, I saw it with my clients, is like they were the whole like COVID thing, like anybody that was posting anything quote unquote health related was just squashed, gone, couldn't find it. Basically, like they were trying to keep from people putting out false information about COVID and health and vaccinations and whatever else. And so like I worked with a number of like health coaches and physical therapists, and like none of their content was then showing up on any platform. And it was like, if they had an email list, that wouldn't matter, right? Like if you had a direct email newsletter or drip campaign, that's realistically like today, as of right now, your best form of connection. Will that change someday? Maybe, who knows? Which is the weirdest thing ever, because email is actually archaic in terms of like ways of connecting with people. It's like the oldest, most outdated platform of all time, yet it's still the most powerful in terms of like actually directly connecting with your clients and customers. And so just keep that in mind of like whatever platform you're building on, whether it's YouTube or whatever, is like ultimately the goal is to somehow make a connection via email.
Yeah,
That's
your
very
list.
true.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Just because they probably don't have your website bookmarked to see
Yeah.
what your blog posts are. But if they're getting that email, you can have that link to your latest blog post or talk about a case study. You can even throw affiliate links if you're like Rashad and you've got a bunch of WordPress plugins that you use regularly, advanced custom fields and Yoast SEO Pro and things like that. You can have affiliate links in your newsletter to get, maybe an extra $5 for your next coffee for the month or something in there. So yeah, newsletters can do more than just fill up someone's inbox. You can provide value, and if you've got I've been working on membership sites, or I actually haven't built one yet, but I've been studying a lot of videos, and I've got just started working on one that we've actually subscribed to MemberStack, and we're starting to link everything up to, but that's going to have a newsletter. And part of that newsletter is that for anybody who's on the free plan, they're going to get marketed to upgrade to one of the other 2 paid tiers. And if someone on that paid tier is not going to see that sign up and pay because they're already on a paid tier. There might be an upgrade to the deluxe tier from the basic paid tier, but
in your newsletter, in your email newsletter, are you toggling that on and off of show this upgrade block, or are you sending out 2 different newsletters? One has the upgrade block, one doesn't have the upgrade block.
I think what we're going to do is either do that through either MailChimp or ConvertKit and send out separate emails depending on who's in it's easier to do in MailChimp because you can have different categories.
Yep.
It's harder to do in ConvertKit. I'm not sure about HubSpot or some of the other MailerLite type programs that are out there, but ConvertKit, everybody's kind of in one silo, and you can use tags to kind of break them up. But in MailChimp, you can have different silos depending on different tiers if you've got a membership site, and you can send them different emails that leave that out so you don't have to worry about toggling things on and off.
Yeah. Rashad, did you say you were Constant Contact?
Active Campaign.
Active
I
Campaign.
was just about to ask if you had. It blows my mind that you work for Active Campaign. I had to like kind of keep my cool before when you introduce yourself because I use it every day, and I'm fangirling. So what's your take on this?
I would say I think it just comes down to no matter what tool you use, it comes back again to the emails, but just one more level to it is just having separate lists. I mean, because from the data that you have for example, using that example of who's on that premium plan and then the deluxe plan, from the email addresses who's on what. Like if you pull it from your database, or I don't know how you do it, maybe you have some plugins that figure that out or whatever. But like I think once you just segment your lists, then you can create a template, whether it's in MailChimp, whether it's an Active Campaign, whatever, that's for that list. And you create like an email campaign, and you do whatever you do. You have like some sort of drip, funnel, whatever you want to call it. And that is where the separation I think will just happen. And you don't have to worry about, okay, is this person going to get that same email? Just make sure your lists are your data source is good, and you should be fine as far as that goes.
That makes sense. Adrian, I built a MemberStack site. I thought it was actually like, once you've got your pages set up, you've got all the pages that you need. Once you have those all set up, I thought hooking up MemberStack was super like I thought it was going to be like, okay, this could be a day or two of me figuring this out and finally getting it all hooked up. It was a morning, and so that'll be cool. That'll be definitely cool. And then you'll hook up with like Zapier. You'll send the memberships over to MailChimp or whatever you end up using.
Yeah, that's the idea. And like you said, it seems to be pretty straightforward. And when I first started using Webflow, I didn't know anything about custom attributes or anything like that. And then last year I was converting a couple of Webflow sites to WordPress and was using the Udesly converter. And that takes a whole lot of custom attributes and values, and you have to put into the fields and stuff like that. So I was definitely aware how that works now because I use them for filters. If I don't need something like a JetBoost, or I haven't used the FinSuite CMS filter system yet, but JetBoost requires quite a bit of custom attributes and values in the settings panel. So member stack, like you said, it seems like you paste a couple of links into your buttons and then a couple of values into a couple fields, and you're ready to go.
Yeah, similar to JetBoost. Yeah.
I've seen a couple of posts though about the fact that MemberStack wasn't actually completely keeping things unavailable, but that if you have a link, you can still get to it. You just can't get to it if you're.
I think what it
It's-
is, if you have JavaScript turned off, then there's no way for them to know that you
Yeah.
aren't logged in. So they have this thing where it's like, I think what you do is you put if you want it to be private, I think you put an overlay. I think this might be what it is. You like put an overlay on the whole page that's black. And then you give that some sort of an attribute. And then when you have JavaScript turned off, the page is black. You can't see anything. You could probably go into the code and you could copy the code and you could like still look. Now you're getting into some like really, even turning JavaScript off, I think is kind of a like advanced thing that most people probably don't have, but you have a black screen. And then I think MemberStack then takes, like hides that or takes that away or like does something. So there's some sort of a hack or like a way that they've tried to get around that security consideration, but that was something that,
because it's not, I mean, that to me then sounds like it's not setting a cookie on your computer saying you're logged in. It's just showing or hiding based on the JavaScript.
Yeah. And it might be the cookie might update based on the, I think the cookie doesn't get created without the JavaScript. And so therefore,
Yeah, because normally when you're logging into something, there is like a whole cookie creation thing that's happening that says you're logged in, therefore you can see this. And then you're essentially testing against that cookie all the time to see whether the person is logged in or can they see this content based on their membership level or whatever. So, and I just don't know exactly how MemberStack works, but that makes sense that it's the JavaScript.
I think they are actually, if I remember, this was a few months ago, they sent out a post that was like, we first built our tool in a certain way and we've realized that the way we built it doesn't allow us to update it all that frequently, or it's hard to make updates. So we're making the tough decision. We're going to completely rebuild our tool. But as a result, that means we can't really work on new features right now. So we'll do hot fixes if there's a big bug, but otherwise we're going to spend all our time working on this version 2 so that then we can make more updates. And I think as a part of version 2, they were going to have something that was a more secure method in case people have JavaScript turned off. They haven't released version 2 yet.
Yeah,
so
makes sense.
Webflow should just throw some money at them and buy them and just integrate them at this point. Because wasn't there some mention of their membership system in some way coming out? I didn't even read the whole thing, but
they teased it.
Yep.
They teased
it. Okay.
And apparently it's coming. They are apparently closer and closer. And apparently at No Code Conf in November, which is now going to be all virtual, there will be a slew of announcements, according to the last update from Vlad, that there are going to, everything that he was asked, it was like, well, just wait till No Code Conf. Just every question that was the answer. So
it's all virtual.
Yes, that came out last week. They were going to do an in-person, but then a lot of the people would be virtual, but they sent out a note last week that they have decided to go all virtual.
I was like, I got to buy my tickets for that, but so that's good.
No, you don't. Chapter leaders get them for free. Not to make
those.
What? Sign me up.
Those of us who are having a real serious FOMO now all feel like, oh, good. Okay, I'm not missing now.
Well, who's the chapter leader in your corner of Canada?
Yeah, I'm
You
not.
can still come here. It's fine.
I wouldn't be surprised if they did like a separate payment plan as well, like how e-commerce has its separate thing.
Mhm.
Because I feel like when you have memberships, you need a bigger database, like straight up.
Yep.
So, and then some more complexity and things like that. So in that slew of announcements, don't be surprised if there's like a price hike or hopefully just a separate plan.
Show of hands, who's used e-commerce in Webflow? 2, 1.5.
A little bit.
I haven't either. Does it feel like an afterthought, or is it something that
It's kind of useless without having a persistent account you can log back into. Like how if you're working at scale, like how you go, like if you order something, you want to be able to see order history, or okay, yeah, you can
Right.
put your tracking and stuff, but I mean, if there's no account link to it, like why did you build it?
Plus in Shopify, because I did a few Shopify sites, you get like, if you build a site, I think you get some sort of like affiliate, like reoccurring income, I think, of some form. I was like,
If you're a partner,
oh, is that what it is? Okay.
well, if you're a partner and you build a site, I
you
think,
get the recurring revenue?
yeah, I think. I know that's
Uh,
how it works with BigCommerce. There is an affiliate thing with BigCommerce as well, but if you're a partner with BigCommerce and you build a site for someone else, under your plan or under your partner program, then you can get a monthly.
So I've got one last thing that I was writing on my notes that like popped into my head, and I know we said that we've got 5 minutes here. We can, but so a few years ago I did this thing. I did this thing called 30 by 500, and the way that it gets its name is if you could have, if you can get 30 people paying you, it works both ways, I guess. But if you can get 30 people paying you $500 a month, or you can get 500 people paying you $30 a month, then you make like $180,000 a year. And that's like that. So like that should be your threshold of like, then that like, that's the number. You don't have to think huge, right? You don't have to be thinking like, I need 1 million people to buy my product, but it's so that they named their course 30 by 500. And it's all a course about starting and building products and web products and things. And so I know we had a few people on here that were like starting businesses or wanting to get a side hustle going and things like that. And so it's by it's a woman named Amy Hoy, who is kind of like a JavaScript. She's kind of a front end person, and it's Amy and Alex. I don't know Alex's last name, but they've got a podcast called Stacking the Bricks, and they talk a lot about marketing and building and validating, instead of building your thing and then validating your business idea after you've built it. They talk a lot about validating your idea and then building it, so that it's a lot more likely to succeed. And so their course is called 30 by 500. The reason I thought of it though, in relation to what Corey was talking about, was two things. They called them e-bombs, which were like email bombs, where it's like you create such good content that you're gonna drop it in people's inboxes, and they're gonna go nuts. They're gonna love it because you are giving them such good content that they'll after doing a few of those, they will eventually just come to trust you. And so, but the key to those big email releases, or those big things that you build, was that they said, in everything you do, try to save people. So for every blog post you write, every video you do, try to save people 10 hours of work, or save them $1,000. So if you can kind of, and it's not going to be like a true science of like, yes, I saved them 10 hours, but that's kind of the goal. So like, let's say you do something where it's like, hey, I banged my head against the wall for days trying to figure this out. And it was such a pain in the ass. Well, now I made a little tool that does that for you, or I made a video that walks you through exactly how to do it. So you don't have to spend 10 hours of your life going through this. Or you could pay someone else to do this for you, or I've just made this thing for you that effectively allows you to do this for free. Or here's a way that you can make $1,000. So there are kind of rules of thumb, like try to shoot for that 10 hours or $1,000. And then you know that like this is something that is good enough that's the bar to like, that is the kind of content that is going to get noticed. So that was the first thing. And the second thing that they talked about a lot was they called it a sales safari. And they're like, if you go hunting and you're going on a safari and you're looking for your prey, you probably like are going to these places where the animals hang out, right? So you're going to go to the watering hole where all of the animals are drinking water. And then that's an easier place to hunt than just like out. And so they called it the sales safari. And so what they did was they're like, find your avatar's watering hole. So if you find your avatar's watering hole and go and kind of be a voyeur, kind of just like spy a little bit and just like take note of like, what are they talking about? What are the issues that they're having? What are the problems that they're trying to solve? What are the topics that get the most action, right? Go and read those things and you'll get a really good idea as to what your avatar, what their pain points are. And that's a really good way to figure out what's going to save them 10 hours or what's going to save them $1,000. And so you go in there and that is basically your watering hole to get all of these ideas for content that you can create that will be attractive to those people. And so then you go create that content and you actually try to save them time or money. And then what you can do, and hopefully by that point, if this is an actual business that you're interested in, you would also be a part of that watering hole. You'd be an active member in that community or whatever. But then you can go in there and you can start engaging with people, right? So let's say there's this really long thread and everyone's having trouble. You can go in there and be like, hey, actually the thing that solved it for me was I did X, Y, and Z. If that doesn't make all that much sense, I actually like did a little video on this to like explain it because I thought other people might have problems as well. Link to your video. And now what you've got is you've got a captive audience that are all at that watering hole. And now you are finding your avatar and you're basically serving them water right. You're like, have a captive audience of that. And then you go to the next one and you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to write a blog about this, or I'm going to create a video or do a podcast on this, or they don't have to be, they were talking about like, maybe one of the things is you like create a little course or you create a little widget or you build a little printable PDF that is like a checklist of things. It doesn't just have to be a blog or a podcast. It could be, you can kind of think outside the box and fit the solution to what the problem is, right? I always get traveling is always so hard. And I feel like I waste so much time packing and all this. Well, I made you a checklist for your packing, right? And so anyway, that was something that I thought was that I sometimes think about when I'm trying to come up with ideas is I'll go and I'll figure out what are these people struggling with. And then you go there, you get your ideas, you create your really high quality content. You can kind of paste the link there, or you can then take that high quality content and email it out to your people as well. So I would recommend that course as well. If there's anyone who's trying to start a business or start a side hustle or anything, it's 30x500. I think it's 30x. Can put the link in the chat, but sorry, I'll get off my my little.
No, you're good. That was great. I just final thought on that. Yeah, just final thought on that. I would just say too is like I think it always starts with your avatar too. Is like, and if you're not sure of what their problems are, ask them. You already know who they are. Just shoot them a text or an email, or ask them when you run into them, be like, hey, what keeps you up at night? What are your challenges? What are your struggles? And then help.
Or
We're
just
at
get them in
9:00.
a room, and get them drunk, and they'll just try.
Charge it all to your business account. And yeah.
Hey, business expense. Yeah.
I actually did have one question. Has anyone had experience using those like social like lead generator, like where it's like, hey, if you share this email or tweet about this, then you'll get, have you ever used any of those things to try to get more subscriptions or get more signups? Or do you know what I'm talking about? Where it's like, if you tweet about this and you tell 4 people, then you're going to get a coffee mug. Or maybe there's like you could win a prize. All you have to do is give us 3 emails of friends who might be interested in this. And then we'll reach out to them, and then you'll be entered 3 times. Have you ever used any of those? Thoughts?
I feel like that's something that you need a lot of volume of customers or user base for it to be effective, because first of all, how many people are going to share? Very few. Within that, how many people are going to care about your contest? Even fewer. So, and I'm being blunt, I guess, but I think I personally noticed that with like these, big Twitter accounts or
Hi, Lopez.
The gurus do it, I guess. Yeah. With their little I don't know, coupon codes or discounts or whatever. So that's where I've seen it, and I would imagine, kind of like what I said, like the volume is probably what's going to decide if it's effective or not. Like other strategies, like like for example, like the email newsletter and stuff. I mean, that's something I think everyone has a more or less level playing field with, as long as you get the emails and the qualified leads or something. I'd say that's like almost like a more level playing field, but like some of these things are a little like you need the numbers to make it effective, I think.
Yeah, there's a newsletter that I subscribe to called Morning Brew. Comes out every morning and it's quite well known, right? And that's what I thought of when you mentioned that they'll have like serious stuff like, oh, we're gonna give away 5 iPads kind of thing, right? And then you really do get a lot of people, but I mean they've grown massively over the past couple of years.
Have you heard about how they got off the ground? Their origin story is fascinating.
Don't recall if I have or not.
They would go to college campuses, and they would go to college campuses because they were talking about like business stuff, right? Is it? Yeah. And they would go to business classes at college campuses, and they would give a spiel at the front of the class, and then they'd like pass around a sheet of paper to see if people wanted to sign up, and no one would do it. And so they actually stood outside the class and would talk to people will you sign up? Will you sign up? And that's how they started out that way, by individually talking to people. Then they got to a point where they had enough that it started to, I think like what Rashid was saying is or Rashad, excuse me, was saying, where it was, they had enough mass that then things started to spread, but it took boots on the ground, kind of talking to people individually to get that traction. But yeah, I got a sticker for Morning Brew. I got a keychain because I had like shared it with some people, and so they're like, if you share with 3 people, you'll get a keychain. I was like, all right, I'll share it with some people. So then I got a keychain. I want the mug.
What you said in that giveaway, you're giving away iPads. I mean, you gotta have a whole bunch of money to give away. How many of iPads you're talking about? Right?
But they get sponsorship from all sorts of places, right?
Okay, that's that too.
Yeah, they're not poor to start with, but and the iPad's an unusual one. That was a very special, and it might have only been one iPad. I can't remember exactly, but
at this point, I think they have like a couple million subscribers, right?
Yeah. But it's been that, sort of viral, telling people, people telling other people about it. So,
yeah. All right. We are over on our time. Want to be respectful. Everyone's got lives and things, but thank you so much for Corey. First off, thank you for putting in the time, putting that together. That was great. A lot of great nuggets in there. That was
Mhm.
fantastic. To echo what Rachel said earlier, she said it a lot better than I will, but thank you for coming. We really, it's nice having the good dialogue and people who want to contribute, and really that's what we're trying to facilitate and create here, is a space where we learn something, and then everyone gets to talk about it. And I think that's what makes this engaging. And so hopefully you've enjoyed that and will want to come back on future weeks and contribute to the conversation. So anything else, Rachel, that you can
Nah,
all
I
right.
talked more than usual this time. I'm pretty good. Thanks.
All righty. Thank you so much, everyone. It's been great.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.